Welcome back to Lost Legacies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Sam.
Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Arcane, my friend.
Oh, jeez. Hey,
Yep.
nobody warned me. Okay, nobody warned me that it was gonna get real. I'm sitting here like, hey, this is cool. It's fun. Like, it's all this colorful. It's fantasy. It's got this stuff, and then the emotion kicks in.
Yeah, dude. I've been saying from the beginning, like Arcane was released in 3-episode acts, and that was Act 1.
Man,
Yeah.
Boy, does it feel like it.
Yeah. But before we get into it, what's new? Got anything to talk about?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I spent all of Saturday watching the Twilight movies.
Oh, okay. Wasn't what I expected to hear, but okay.
Yeah. You gotta keep you on your toes, keep you on your guard. Nobody knows this about me. But me and my friends, we kind of unironically love the Twilight movies. They're pretty good. There are some stinkers. There's a lot of bad stuff in it, but you get your friends together, you watch it, you spend almost 10 hours watching, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson make eyes at each other. It's not a bad time.
How many movies are there? 4?
There's 5.
5. Wow.
Right. 4 books and technically the series, 5 movies, and then they had the latest book that was all from but I don't want to talk about that. Here's what I really want to talk about. I saw Black Panther: Wakanda Forever on Friday night.
Oof.
Yeah. It's really good. I have gripes with it, but honestly, it's like this is a movie that I feel like nobody involved with wanted to have to make. And the fact that they were able to pull it off in such a way that is as good as it is, it is, yeah. More than I think any movie or any like biopic or like docu-series that you've seen or whatever. This is really like the celebration of a person and a person's life. It's not just the character of T'Challa, but it's Chadwick Boseman too. And yeah, for some of it, it feels a little disjointed, but I kind of feel like that's almost sort of the point, because T'Challa's not there, and now it's like everybody is sort of figuring out how this works now. And of course, outside forces, just affecting the rule of Wakanda and everything that's going on. And then it's also like the character journeys, Angela Bassett, the queen, Ramonda, she's distraught. She lost her husband. Now she's lost her son. Letitia Wright knocks it out of the park. It's such a great movie. Yeah.
I probably have to check it out sometime this week. I am on vacation as of right now, the week that we're recording this. So
ooh, I'll see. Fancy you.
Yeah, I do. I do have some things that I want to watch or finish or catch up on. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I did finish Doctor Who Flux.
Okay,
which I have a lot of mixed feelings for. I am willing to cut them slack because it was supposed to be a 10-episode season, but because of COVID, BBC forced them to cut it down to 6 episodes, and they did it like 2 weeks before they were set to film. Ooh. So it's very disjointed. A lot of characters are there who don't need to be there. And I feel like if it was a full 10 episodes, we would have got, proper story arcs for all these people. And here's the thing. All these characters have story arcs, but it almost feels unearned or random because you could tell there's so much has been cut.
Mm,
I honestly can't tell you what that storyline was about. Like, I still don't really get it.
mm.
Um, so I don't know. We'll see. So I basically have 2 episodes left with Jodie as the doctor. So I'll probably get. I don't know if I'll finish those this week because we're not going to get new Doctor Who till like fall of next year.
Yeah.
So I could take my time, you know. So we'll see. I don't know, but yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So let's get into it, man. We're not only just talking about episode 3 of Arcane, which, let's see, is called The Base Violence Necessary for Change. While Jason Victor single handedly changed Piltover's future, Vi leads a desperate attempt to rescue Vander with disastrous consequences. So I want to talk about this episode, but I also want to talk about the full 3 episodes, because this is Act 1, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, Sam, how do you feel, man? You literally just watched this like seconds ago.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as it was over, I sent you a stream of text and be like, all right, let's do it. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. It was a lot. It was intense. Uh, yeah. All these emotions, they're so raw. And we lost so many people in this episode.
Yeah, man, it was rough.
It was so rough, man.
Which I think is it's kind of a turning point, because there's been some action sequences in the first 2 episodes, but this is the first one where like we actually got to see really cool. Well, I guess you had episode 1, but we really got a really cool choreographed fight scene in this. Because this episode 1, we had like the slow motion one. We were talking about look like a painting.
Mm-hmm.
This one, though, actually, the stakes are so much higher. We lose some people. I don't know. I think this episode is kind of what changed things, because it's like, oh crap. Okay, this is 9 episodes, but episode 3, we've already lost several quote unquote main or featured characters.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And it's funny too, because we were talking about the buildup between the enforcers and the lanes. They're like, oh, it's building to something, it's building something. And none of that really paid off this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It was something completely different. And I'm like, so they really did it in a way that you didn't see it coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like now, well, one, I mean, who knows? Like, there were a lot of Piltover guards that died, but the lanes, oh man, I guess is technically on fire, like, I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know how much is on fire. It was pretty much just like that dock, that one warehouse.
I meant metaphorically.
Oh, metaphorically.
Metaphorically,
Yeah.
it's gonna go. It's up in flames now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, it is like, God, I don't know. Shout out to the writers for like coming up with this story that's based on a video game, that's based on video game characters, that none of this exists in the League of Legends lore.
Mm-hmm.
They
It
just
does
decided it does now. They just decided to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, he didn't have to go off like this.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's crazy too, because like we talked about how like they built this fantasy world, and there's not like there's a lot of lore, but it's kind of all just separate ideas. There's not really any one way to discover it or learn about it.
Mhm.
If you're watching Arcane, which is so weird, because if you're watching your Arcane, you have no idea what this world looks like because you're all stuck in this one city.
Mhm.
I bought the book of it's essentially like a book about the art and the story and each of the different countries and continents in this world. It's amazing. They're so totally different.
Mhm.
But so like I kind of like I'm curious what the mindset was while building out this world, especially a video game that's focused solely on the characters.
Mhm.
You know, you don't get the lore in the game. If you do, it's very little. You have to go elsewhere to find it. So, like, did they come up with the city of Piltover? And it's like, hey, what if it's like this warring city of the rich and the oppressed? You know, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming in the game it's always been like the two entities, you know, and they're like, well, we could set it in there so we can see that strife and I don't know, maybe war or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really curious, like the I don't know, I guess the timeline of creations. Like what came first? Did the characters come first? And it's like, hey, let's give them a really cool playground to set their stories. Or
Mm-hmm.
did they build the city first and then they came up with the characters? Because like half the cast are from the lanes and the other half is from Piltover.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and today this was a really good example of that. I'm kind of curious how you feel about it, but because there was a lot of back and forth between the super heavy drama of Vander's rescue and then Jason Victor experimenting with Hex Tech.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how
Mm-hmm.
did you feel that? I like it was kind of abrupt, some of those cuts.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Just I think just because I mean, by their nature, they're two very different storylines that are happening. You know, one feel like they both feel desperate, but they're desperate in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just yes, some of those cuts back to back to the boys, just figuring out the hex tech technology. It's like yeah, it kind of it didn't lessen any of the impact from like the Vander stuff or the Lane stuff, but um it did just kind of feel like, oh, okay, that was an interesting like cut. But I think it all comes together in the moment that they activate their machine, and
Mm-hmm.
it starts to like the stone starts to resonate, because then at that same time, underneath their city, Powder is discovering sort of the same thing, how much
Mm-hmm.
power these stones have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what's his name, is it Jace?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like Jason Victor, like they already know the power of the stones, so like but they're just seeing it like, you know quantified. They're like, oh wow, like we're trying to figure it out, whereas Powder puts it together like, that's the thing that caused the explosion.
Yeah.
I can use that then. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, like as soon as she said that, I was like, oh no.
Uh-oh.
Like
Yeah.
I knew it was gonna go off in a bad way, and I just didn't expect it to go off that
Mm-hmm.
bad.
And it's such it's exciting because you're seeing the progress, but it's also terrifying. And that's that's when Jace says, he's like, no, this is the era of Hex Tech. And that's the last we see of them. And from then on out, it's Powder blowing everything to hell. You're like,
Mhm.
uh-oh. Oh no. This is very much what Heimerdinger feared, you know?
Mhm.
Not this case in particularly that some little girl's gonna put it in a grenade, but it's that power, you know?
Mhm.
Powder figured it out and it's now in the wrong hands,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So, oh man.
Well, is are her stones still around?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I don't
Perhaps
know.
she threw one grenade and that was all of that was from one grenade.
Well, but she put two stones inside the monkey, and
Oh,
then
okay, two.
and then there's the third stone that's like tied to him, that like the symbol, when the symbols clash,
Oh,
it
damn. So that
goes
was
off the
three.
thing. That was three stones. Those were all the
So
stones she had.
did she only have three?
Yeah. Yeah, because
Oh.
they showed that they show or I think so, because they showed that when she's freaking out and she's crying and she throws her suitcase,
Hmm.
three stones are what fall out.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's when she sees, she's like, oh, I can
Yeah.
use those. Yeah.
So maybe that's it then.
But
Regardless, she knows what they do.
yeah, yeah. And more importantly, Silco knows what they do.
Mm. Hmm.
Which let's talk about Silco.
what a fascinating character.
Yeah, yeah. His whole intro, where
Mm-hmm.
he's just like blissfully floating in the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
intercut with him being violently strangled under the water, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just like, and then just talking about like the opposites of what this all is. It's like, yeah, there's a peacefulness in drowning to a point,
Mm-hmm.
because every bit of you is fighting to not have it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just like it goes on for so long that you eventually get to the point where you think, have you had enough? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, like,
Yeah,
oh.
this show's really doing a good job of what it's presenting and how it's doing it. Because you know me, as far as a storyteller, I love nothing more than subverting expectations.
Mm-hmm,
Now, you can't just subvert expectations. You got to have umph to your story. You got to actually have heart, in a story. And Arcane is doing it really well. How everyone, we see Piltover first and experience that before we go into the lanes.
mm-hmm,
We see the difference between Piltover and the lanes, and we see Vi's life before we meet Jace, because he doesn't
mm-hmm,
come until episode 2. And we get 2 episodes where Silco is just barely in them, kind of stereotypical evil villain. And
mm-hmm,
then we get episode 3 and we actually get to know him a bit more, and you start to see what his motivations are. And it's like, oh, okay,
mm-hmm,
he isn't just some common run of the mill villain, created for the show. Like, no, like he is a product of this world,
mm-hmm,
and he's perfect. He's perfect for this show where there's not really a right or wrong. There's not really, I guess you could argue there is good and bad, but so much of this world is in this weird gray area. Like, he's
mm-hmm,
kind of the perfect antagonist for that.
mm-hmm,
Especially because you're talking about him drowning and all this stuff. And it's like, well, the big reveal at the end is Vander's the one doing it.
mm-hmm,
Vander was the one trying to kill him. And Vander's been built up as our hero. He's the one our heroes look up to,
mm-hmm,
you know? And yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting the way, like, you're absolutely right. Vander is like that classical, like rebellion leader,
Mm-hmm.
who's like, he's just trying to look out for everybody now. It's like he doesn't want to start the fight anymore.
Yeah.
And everybody sees that. Everybody sees, like, hey, like, Vander's not what he used to be, all that. But in this, we get it contextualized a bit more, where it's like, uh him and Silco were like brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And they both had this fire in them. For whatever reason, Vander wanted to take him out,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like we get to where we are now because of this moment, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and it's like, 100%, I feel like this is like, that event is what sparked Vander to maybe not fight anymore, you
Mm-hmm.
know um and and then conversely for Silco, it's like, no, this gives me all of the reason to keep fighting,
Because even he says that, like Vander says, you lost my respect and all that stuff. Silco says, I hated you for so long for what you did to me, but you always had my respect until you stopped fighting.
Mm-hmm,
You gave up on everything we were working for. So I'm like, so even after being betrayed and almost killed, he still had that respect and those feelings for Vander.
mm-hmm,
But actually seeing, him give up, it's just like, oh man. And we don't know at what point that happens. We don't know if that's after Vander does that, before or after he takes in Vi and Powder,
yeah,
We don't really know that timeline. It's also interesting too, because when well, it sucks that our favorite police officer is killed
yeah,
brutally off screen, and then so
mm-hmm,
is Benzo.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, dude, this episode had a body count. And when Vi's telling everyone, Milo and Clegg are just saying, like, we have to get Vander. He's our dad, too. And it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Jeez. Which is
Man.
interesting. I want to bring something up here, Sam,
Okay.
because now that unfortunately Vander is gone, something that I find extremely fascinating is one, the character of Powder. We definitely see her go through the emotions in this one because we already knew she had a lot of feelings of inadequacy, especially
Mm-hmm.
with Milo because he was always just talking down to her. She always wanted to do more than what she was capable of, which leads to this episode. But then that the fact that she's getting left behind as well, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
for her own good and safety, you definitely see the abandonment issues because like she's just not like she loses it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
she's like going crazy being left behind. And that's what kind of sparks the idea with the stones.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this, and we have this figure of Vander, who's this heroic figure in our main characters, the kids' lives. They would do anything for him and have such a love and respect for him. However, Powder never has Vander never speaks to Powder,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I even like this one because like he's talking Milo through while Milo's trying to pick the lock to get him out. He's like, take a breath. You can do this. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and then we see him trusting Clagger in the first episode, almost as if he knows Clagger's the more responsible one in the group. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
tell me everything what happened, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's these cool relationships, but there's nothing there between him and Powder. We see him like pouring her the drink at the end of the last episode, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
He does his final lines are to Vi, and he tells her, take care of Powder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't know what that is. Well, you know what, Sam?
What?
I just had an epiphany right now
Okay.
because I was gonna say he sees himself in Vi. Does he see Silco in Powder?
Ooh, that's
Because
interesting.
him and Vi are so alike. That's why they're always butting heads. I never
Mm-hmm.
even realized that. Does he see Powder the same way? Very volatile.
Mm-hmm. I mean, potentially.
Mm.
And I feel like that would play into, like this episode, set up this, this relationship, and it's like, okay, Vander and Soko, they used to be like brothers,
Hmm.
they they're not that anymore. They're willing to fight, they're willing to kill each other,
Hmm.
to get to the end. And then this episode ends where Vi pretty much makes the decision that she's done. She's done looking out for Powder, and she walks away. And Powder's screaming and crying, and she's like please don't leave me. And I know, and I know because it's contrived isn't the right word for it, but it's just the nature of things that like Vi sees Silco going up to Powder, she's gonna run, and then that other cop just like
Right?
gasses her and is like, "No, we gotta go." Like,
It's like Vi
ooh,
did. She walked away, but then as soon as she saw Powder in trouble, she was
mm-hmm,
going back. She was going
mm-hmm.
back for her little sister.
She was going back for her little
Oh,
sister, and Powder doesn't know that.
Powder
Powder
doesn't know
just
that.
Powder just thinks that Vi left her, and I think like because Silco looks like he's fully gonna like kill her.
Yeah, yeah.
He has like the way like we're seeing his hands like holding the knife. He even approaches her, very
Hmm.
like, kind of like a hunting position, it's like
Hmm.
all that stuff. And then like Powder surprises him and just like fully like leaps at him and
Hmm.
hugs him, latches onto him. And even in that moment, he's like where she says, like, I don't have a sister anymore. She left me. The way his hand is positioned too, and the way like his men are all looking at him like, oh shit, like he's gonna kill her still. And then he just embraces her. It's like I think, yeah, it perfectly sets up this idea that, like, yeah, potentially, I think Vander sees a lot of Silco in
Hmm.
Powder. And maybe that's why we never saw them, being very, him very like nurturing or caring towards her,
Hmm.
or anything like that, because he sees what somebody who has these qualities, and has
Hmm.
these fears about themselves, sees what that's become,
Yeah.
what that can turn a person into.
Yeah, and I think it could also be like because I think Powder's main thing is she's trying so hard to be like Vi
Hmm.
and to compete with the others. Not to compete, but just to be equals. She's
Hmm.
trying so hard. And I'm kind of wondering if that's what the deal was with Silco and Vander, because Vander's been this hero to the lanes. Was Silco really trying so hard to be that,
Hmm.
to be equals with his quote unquote brother that he ended up going too far, Because
Hmm.
we still don't know why Vander turned on him. So I think maybe it's that potential of like, who knows how far she's going to go to try and be equals with her sister.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, man. Also like it just makes so much more sense because um Vi just blows up at Powder and saying it's all her fault, and she smacks her,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, that's how we've seen up to this point. That's how Vi solves her problems with her fists, and she
Hmm.
ends up hurting the one person she truly loves. But then she grabs her by the face and calls her a jinx, just like Milo. But then she catches herself. And I'm like, that's exactly what Vander did to Silco in the flashback and on that catwalk. He
Hmm.
grabs Silco by the face. It's too, listeners, if you're not listening, I mean, if you're listening but you didn't watch, it probably sounds very on the nose, like, oh, it's so mirrors each other too perfectly. Like, it's brilliant the way they pull this off.
Hmm.
Because like once you start talking about it, thinking about it, you're like, oh, you see into the writer's minds. Okay, I see where they were going with this. And it's just
Hmm.
it's heartbreaking and it's brilliant because you don't see it coming.
Yeah.
Again, subverted expectations. Last week you said Vi's going to go away to prison, probably do some kind of time, and it'll probably be a better situation than what Powder is in.
Yeah.
And Powder won't realize it and will hold it against her. I still think that's kind of it's not exactly, but like Powder doesn't know that Vi was going back for her.
Hmm.
She thinks her sister abandoned her, which
Hmm.
like even more fuels that those issues of abandonment.
Hmm.
Which is worse because now that she has Silco in her life, who knows how deep or how far she's gonna fall with this guy? Like, is she gonna find safety in this new crew? Like,
Hmm.
man, jeez,
I know.
yeah. Meanwhile, Jason Victor are playing rocks.
Oh God.
Like, I would have preferred to have like this whole episode could have just been Vi and Powder,
Hmm.
but especially seeing that like this was its own thing. This is one act. I think they were really trying to get all the hex tech stuff introduced, especially since we didn't have any of Jace or the council in episode one. I think they're like, well, we need to get X amount done by this point in the story.
Yeah.
So, but and again, like you said, it just complements each themselves too perfectly. The way they create hex tech, they solve it, how to harness magic through science, and at the same time, Powder's figuring out how the stones work.
Yeah. Powder's figuring out how to put these things in a grenade, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah. That too. That's that beautiful, it's like Silco's narration in the beginning. It's a story of opposites.
Mm-hmm.
There's on this one hand, like, yeah, like these boys, their lives have now changed and they're gonna change potentially the lives of everybody. and they see it as like, wow, it's such a beautiful thing. It's a monumentous thing. Magic can help people.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, Powder over here killing her
Blowing
family.
everything up.
Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
she's so proud of it too. She's like, Vi, did you see it? It worked. It finally worked.
Mm-hmm.
She's so proud of herself. And then she realizes what she did.
Mm-hmm.
And the animators are, dude, like, because you can see Powder's face change. You see the acting,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all CG and hand drawn. Like, there is no green dots on an actor portraying this character.
Yeah.
It's all the visual artists. I'm like, how did they do this? How did they animate such emotion so perfectly? Like, dude,
Yeah.
it's a heartbreaking story, you know? And this was Act One, Sam. We got 6 episodes to go. What's gonna come next?
And let me guess, it only gets worse from here.
I know. Well, okay, so do you have any predictions after what we've seen and like kind of where we leave off?
Uh, okay. Well, I knew that Powder was eventually going to change her name to Jinx.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it would be because of this.
Yeah.
So there's that. Uh, I don't know, man. I think like all the like the Jace Victor like Piltover stuff, that's gonna have to come into play with the rest of the stuff in the lanes at some point.
Yeah, because
You
right now
know,
it's definitely two separate stories.
it's definitely two separate stories, and I feel like these stories definitely need to intersect and cross over,
Mm-hmm.
into each other's worlds. These characters need to be in each other's worlds at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
How, I don't know, but we'll get there. Um, so yeah, pretty certain we can see what kind of path Jinx is now gonna go down. Just by the nature of Soko and his gang and what he wants to do and her mental state.
Mm-hmm.
Is, yeah, definitely feel like she's going to be taken advantage of and
Mm-hmm.
changed into something, not like with like the elixir stuff, but or maybe with the elixir stuff, maybe with like a refined stuff.
What do
I
you
don't
call
know.
it? Shimmer.
Shimmer.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
because it look well, because it looks like they lost all of it, you know,
It appears so. It looks like the lab and the
like the guy
crazy
died.
alchemist guy. It looks like he dies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what's left. We'll see where that goes. Vi, I'm not so sure. I feel like Vi's gonna like Vi needs to become the leader that Vander is, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Vi, like that's very much her story. But the way that she was thinking that it's gonna go about is that it's like I feel like she never thought that it was going to be about sacrificing others. That's
Mm-hmm.
the whole conversation like she and Vander had in the last episode, where it was
Mm-hmm.
like, what are you willing to sacrifice to get the world that you want? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, are you willing to sacrifice your family, everybody you love? And her decision at the end of that episode is no, I'm gonna do it. It has to be on me. That's the way this
Mm-hmm.
works. And so now that she has no family and that she's left her only family behind, I feel like this is going to be like, this is the hugest wake up call for her. And it's going to be like, she's going to, not that she's going to become like a wholesome, like good paladin like character,
Mm-hmm.
but she's definitely going to have that burden on her now that like, there's a hole in the world. I have to be the one that fills it with something
Mm-hmm.
good, you know? Um, and we'll see. we'll see how that works. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Because just by, the opening credits, you know, Jinx and Powder look like they're fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see
Yeah.
where that goes.
Yeah. And something that's really fascinating about this is I don't want to give away anything, but like
Hmm.
there's certain things we know just based off of trailers, based off of that opening credits. Like it's really portraying Jinx and Vi to throw down.
Hmm.
In the games, they're two characters. Vi has been a character since the beginning. Jinx has been a character since the beginning, and she's very like I don't know, chaotic neutral, maybe even chaotic evil. Like I don't know,
Hmm.
but she's always been portrayed as this bad guy or an antagonist. So if you're going into the show not knowing any of that, I think that's a hell of a ride.
Hmm.
But even then, it's kind of like I don't know. How do we get there? How do we get to that point? I wouldn't be bringing this up if it wasn't in the opening credits that the two of them are going to fight, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I think that was fascinating too for the fans because they're like, oh, wow, we're seeing a pre Jinx, you know? Is this the origin story? Is this a villain origin story? Or are they going to go more an anti hero route with her? That's the
Hmm.
whole history of Harley Quinn. You know, she started as a villain. People loved her so much. They turned her into an anti hero. Now, I mean, she's pretty much just a hero who does cross the line from time to time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but it's really the reason I want to bring that up is because therapists, they have been showing the show to therapists and like people who study, I don't know what you want to call them, all mental issues and stuff. And
Hmm.
they're having like a field day over this show and the character of Powder
Hmm.
and just how well done they're portraying this little girl losing her mind. You know, that's why I'm glad you brought up her mental state because I feel like it's so easy just to write someone crazy, you know.
Hmm.
I'm a fan of Harley Quinn. I love that character. She's one of my favorite DC characters, but I feel like we definitely get lost in the oh, she's so fun. She gets to break all the rules and she's super sexy. We kind of get lost in like the glamorization of her craziness. You know,
Hmm.
we kind of and still to this day we they've tapped into it in the comics, but we still really don't know her origins or we haven't really seen it. It depends like what comics you read or whose runs you read, you know, stuff like that. So it's very interesting to see the character of Jinx being portrayed as this young child
Hmm.
and to already start putting those pieces together and like, oh,
Hmm.
this is an origin story, but what kind
Hmm.
of origin story is this?
And I feel like because I feel like that's sort of where I'm coming in. Like I had no idea who like Vi and Jinx were,
Yeah.
coming into the show. And just by like the nature of, like you said, it's like, they pretty much like put it in there. It's the last shot of the opening. It's like, yeah, like Jinx and Powder looks like they're fighting each other. So, I'm like, I know that's gonna, they're gonna come to blows at some point. But yeah, it's like it's for me at least, this is the thing where it's like I have no idea. I have
Mm-hmm.
no idea who this person is. So I get to see this very young, innocent person kind of the way like Vi and Vander and everybody else does. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's just trying. She's just trying her best, and then to already see those feelings of inadequacies that need to like prove herself, to that need to help and to fit
Mm-hmm.
in, and then to just be left behind, and to have the things that you do, like it works, but it does the wrong things, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And
Yeah.
then it's yeah, and then like you like you're kind of left with that. So it's like where I'm only gonna use this movie as like this sort of comparison, but it's like whereas like a movie like Joker, by the end of the movie that this dude's gonna become the Joker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, like you said, based off of whatever comics you read, or what sort of writers you're following, what storylines you go into, like you can pretty much put the pieces together, like, oh, okay, like this is where the laugh comes in, this is where his theatricality sort of comes from, this is where his facial scarring comes from, or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, like, but you already know going into that movie that this dude is going to become the Joker, going to become this villain by the end
Mm-hmm.
of it. Whereas, and I feel like a lot of that is very it's very blunt. It's very overt in that, like, oh yeah, like this is why they're crazy. This is why he becomes, the way
Mm-hmm.
he does. Whereas like this just feels like those things are probably there for fans, and those things are probably like blunt for
Mm-hmm.
fans. But at least from my perspective, it's like this feels very subtle and natural, and it very much feels like it feels real. You can feel that like this is a
Yeah.
very real like character who feels these inadequacies. Like you can relate to this, even if you're not fully like Powder,
Mm-hmm.
you can at least relate with that need of needing to prove yourself, needing like and not wanting to be left alone, not
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be left out. And especially because what's the first scene of the whole series?
Exactly.
Like Powder and Vi are together, and they're like, but they're alone. They've
Mm-hmm.
lost everything. They've lost their family, and this is what they have left. They are what they have left.
Mm-hmm.
And so to get to this point where it's like that, like and it never needs to be said. It never needs to be stated outright. A character doesn't have to say it, but we just know, like as much as Vi wants to protect Powder and can't lose Powder, Powder can't lose Vi.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's her world. She
Mm-hmm.
will do anything to protect it, just like Vi.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they both go off and do stupid things.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say that Vi's plan was going to work and they all weren't going to die
It
anyway.
was a trap. She didn't
No,
realize it till they were already in there. It was a trap.
exactly. It was a trap. And it's just like, you know, Powder, I don't think that outcome was going to be any different. The
Yeah.
only exception I think is that Vi would also be dead,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Agreed.
So,
Oh man.
God, just the layers. This is a lasagna.
Yeah.
This
This
is this is
it's
a
just
perfect lasagna.
the
It's just
writing of this is absolutely genius. Like
yeah,
it's now you kind of know why like this was definitely my favorite show of 2021. Like
I see that now.
we
Yeah.
saw some lot of really cool stuff on film and on television, but the amount of creativity and just I don't know what you want to call it, batshit craziness. Like this the show was definitely a gamble to make, but it kind of feels like it. Like they're going all in on the writing.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
subtle about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just paid off so well. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what you think about the next two acts of the show to see if it continues, because that's a hell of a way to start a series with those three episodes.
Mm-hmm. This is the perfect I say this with all the respect, feels like a YA novel, at least
Yeah.
this part, because like I think that's a big misconception with a lot of people, that like YA books, for those of you who don't know, young adult books,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um they can be something like Twilight,
Right.
something that's just full of fluff and full of angst, and like got all this stuff, but at the end of the day, like everything gets resolved, and all like
Mm-hmm.
everything's fine and dandy. I think now more than ever we're seeing this huge shift in YA where that's not the case.
Yeah.
It is kind of becoming an avenue for authors to tell these very complex stories, kind of at least for some of the ones that I've read recently, kind of at the expense of world building, but that just means we get to be with their characters more.
Yeah.
and the characters are showing up that are like, wow, like just doing things like
Hmm.
the most recent example I can give would be Iron Widow is probably like my favorite example of that, because and maybe this was just my preconceived notions, but I went into that story thinking it was going to be completely different. I thought I knew all the twists and turns. It's like, okay, it's a YA, obviously, like there's got to be like some romance. Our main character has, like kind of a crush at the beginning that helps her sort of enact her grand plan. And it's like, okay, that's got to come into play at some point. And it does. But it's just an interesting thing because the world of Iron Widow, like without giving too much away and without like going too much into it, is that it's this very crass and misogynistic world where women are used as a power source. They're used up as batteries to prop up these male warriors. And our main character turns that and becomes the warrior at the expense of a man, and everything changes from there. And just the way the book is written, the way the story's presented itself, it's like I didn't expect any of this. And a lot of the content feels like it never gets too graphic, but it also does feel like there's some gut churning moments in that story that I'm like, wow, that's kind of a lot for, a quote unquote teen book.
I've been working in the book world for 16 years, and just to see the growth of the YA genre has been just like astounding.
Mm-hmm.
Because we never would have had anything like that 16 years ago for the youth. And I think a part of it too is that like kids are being forced to grow up quicker than the
Mm-hmm.
generations before. Um, it's very, it kind of reminds me of uh well, I mean, like look at World War II or Vietnam. How many kids were sent off to war to die, like
Mm-hmm.
I think not really since then have our kids been forced to grow up so quickly. And it's because let's not, I don't want to get political, but if we look at these most recent midterms elections, a lot of things changed, and it was because of the youth vote, and of
Mm-hmm.
course there's other things like the Latinos came out in full force, but they said this is like the first time in history where the majority of voters were under the age of 40.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, heads up people, everyone who had to go through active shooter drills in school, they're now adults
Yep.
and they're voting. I remember having to go through that. So, yeah, like it's really interesting to see the youth of today are going through things like our parents never dreamed of,
Mm-hmm.
and before that. And I think that's a big part of why these stories for young adults are in a way they're changing, but also they're getting more I don't know what you want to call it, heavy, radical.
Mm-hmm.
Because the YA genre has always been full of young love and destiny, and also revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Revolution and rebellion has been key to the YA genre. This has taken us all the way back to Hunger Games and further. You
Mm-hmm.
know, those weren't one offs. Like, those were just the books that were successful enough that were turned into films. But so many uh, trilogies and duologies are out there, YA books, about rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
So now that everyone's kind of getting a little older, it's like those rebellions are getting even more rebellious. Like, it's crazy, man. It's and I have a friend who like focuses a lot on YA fiction and writing, and she's always kind of walked that line. Like, should I just write this as a novel or as a YA? Because she wants to put her life experiences onto the page, but she feels like there's such a benefit if it's a YA novel.
Mm-hmm.
There's a benefit of having young girls read this as opposed to adults.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like the standards and restrictions for those YA books have really opened up. Yeah, I mean that's
Mm.
why a lot of them are having content warnings now because they get heavy.
Yeah. Oh, and
Yeah,
yeah. Iron Widow is no exception.
yeah,
There is a lot of stuff, not just the misogyny, but it's just it is violent, it is graphic, and
full of content warnings. Yeah.
yeah, full of content warnings.
Also, the youth are really keeping the book industry alive.
Oh, heck yeah.
YA and romance. You know,
Yes.
those two genres are keeping the book industry flowing. But that's why you should buy from your local bookstores and not Amazon. I'm just putting that out there because
Hmm.
I don't care who you are or how successful you are. You're making pennies to the dollar if you're selling stuff through Amazon.
Hmm.
So support
Hmm.
your local bookstore.
Hmm. Support your
And
local
a
books.
lot of them do ship. So if you don't have a
Yes.
local bookstore, order it online from someone other than Amazon.
Yes, that is the thing. I quick little rant tangent. I see that a lot so much where it's like, well, I don't have the benefit of going to a local bookstore. That or I don't have a local bookstore outside of like a Barnes and Noble or something. It's like, hey, that's totally fine because you can search. You can search
Mm-hmm.
there and I know a lot of people like to like hiss and like they chagrin or whatever when they talk about TikTok and they talk
Mm-hmm.
about book talk, and it's like, oh, like book talk, it's this whole like thing. It's like there are so many cool bookstores that I follow on there that have one opened my eyes to just like, oh wow, like there's so many like indie bookstores out there,
Mm-hmm.
uh that have all of these like cool nerdy people that read all these cool nerdy books, like whatever. um and it's shown me that like, yeah, there's so many resources out there. You have a supercomputer in the palm of your hand right now that you're
Mm-hmm.
probably listening to this podcast on.
Mm-hmm.
uh you can just search indie bookstores in your state. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's going to be one that has a cool website that's got, great recommendations from people
Mm-hmm.
that you can order, and they are more than happy to ship it to you. Is it going to take longer than Amazon? Absolutely.
For sure.
But,
And
there's a
shipping will be a
benefit.
little more expensive,
Yeah, yeah,
but
it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but I feel like it's going to like it helps. It helps you, it helps the bookstores.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, please look and support for your indie bookshops.
And like Sam said, just Google it. Cool bookstores 2022. You'll see tons of articles or
Mm-hmm.
entries about new bookstores that just opened up this year,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or just like people's favorites.
Mm-hmm.
We're lucky enough to work at one. My whole job is shipping books across the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know that process. But if it's too
And
much for you, just bookshop.org. It's
yes.
literally the easiest website. Bookshop.org.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to help independent bookstores, and it's a super small tight crew who blew up in the pandemic because I want to say there were 6 of them, and when they got COVID, like the whole site had to shut down because they were shipping books around the world and they had to stop. So once they got going again, like it was just they're working so hard and they're helping so many people. Bookshop.org. If you can't find like an indie bookstore that you want to help, go to those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
so easy. I don't know how we start talking about books, but yeah, no, I definitely see what you're talking about. How it's in the same line. Like these first 3 episodes definitely did feel YA,
Mm-hmm.
and not just because the main characters were younger,
Yeah.
but you definitely it's because you see the struggle, you see the fight that we as adults are constantly having to go through with oppression and dealing with governments who say they care about you but really don't, and people who want to choose violence over diplomacy. We deal with that every day,
Mm-hmm.
but now you're seeing it through the eyes of these kids, which we used to be.
Yeah.
We just kind of saw things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Or we saw them exactly for what they were, but they never listened to you because I listen to punk rock. So they said, what does Matt know? And now here I am 25 years later pointing fingers. I'm like, you guys should have listened to me. This is the same crap I was spewing back in middle school and high school, man. Nobody wanted to listen to me
Uh-huh.
because I was listening to punk rock, and you're like, you know what you're talking about. It's like the world, our politics, and these elections have been proving me right for the past 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel good to say that though. I would much rather be wrong and we live
Yeah.
in a strong, peaceful society, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. 100%.
But I feel like this is a very punk rock show, you know? Not for the music, but for the feel and what they're fighting for. It's in the blood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
And
pulsing through their veins, man.
yeah, and you know what? Like, just like the history of everything else, the history of punk rock is messy and bloody. It's
Yeah.
violent,
Yeah.
just like the world. Just like the stuff that they're singing about in their songs. And that's kind of what the best art does. It takes and contextualizes the world that we live in to into this story, whatever story that the writers are trying to give us. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, there is a heavy feeling of punk rock in this,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes with all the good stuff and all of the bad.
And this is what I don't want to have this conversation because we've had it so many times. I don't know if we had it on the podcast, but the concept of punk in fiction, you know,
Mhm.
you know me, Sam. I am a huge, huge fan and advocate of steampunk.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Uh, but you know, this is just an example I'm using. We also know that there's a lot of stuff out there that it's steampunk in the aesthetics only. You
Mhm.
know, oh, why do you have cogs on your hat? Because it looks cool, bro. Like, I don't know, like the whole concept of like steampunk. Don't ask me to explain it because I've been trying to for years and I can't. But it's essentially like, in a way, it's kind of like Piltover, except they're not really using steam.
Mhm.
It's a world where they have found a way to use steam as power, as energy, the same way we used to use like steam engines, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But it builds up this big, rich, safe society, much like Piltover. But this society looks down upon and turns their back on the actual people doing the work. And that's where this kind of air of rebellion comes from. And I think a lot of steampunk forgets about that. Like, that's where the punk comes from. It's
Mhm.
about that clash between the lower and the upper class and trying to find a place and the respect in that world. It just so
Mhm.
happens that in steampunk they have all these cool inventions and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, what would you call this? Because I've asked you this before, Sam. What would you call like arcane punk? Something that has magic, which I still we're just kind of just tiptoeing into that with arcane with hex
Uh-huh.
tech.
Mhm.
So like not yet, but like what is this it? Like
I feel like this is like maybe not so like fantasy punk, but like magic punk,
right.
where it's like it like yeah, there is the possibility that Jason Victor have now discovered like we can use magic and we can use it for good, and that's going to create all this innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, great, fantastic. A little girl just took your magic stone and blew up a dock.
Yeah.
Like, that's the danger. That's the danger that is inherent and that is going on, one, unchecked and unseen
Mm-hmm.
by the higher echelon.
Yeah.
One, because they don't know it yet, but also I feel like they're just gonna try and like, they're gonna have their blinders on. It's like, no, but magic can do this good thing. I know it can
Mm-hmm.
do this good thing. It's like, yeah, but yeah.
There also needs to be something needs to be said about the ones who discover and create hex tech. It's the upper class who are already in control and
Mhm.
already oppressing the lower class. So that's going to be interesting to see, like what happens once they get hex tech.
Mhm. I will say though that even though it is the upper class, you have to take a look at who are the people that are
Mm.
are innovating and pushing this
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Mm-hmm.
Uh Jace is an outsider,
Yeah.
and he was a student, all that stuff. Victor's from the lanes.
Yeah.
he got the chance to go up there, and he says it himself. He's like, I didn't come all this way just to be an assistant.
Yeah.
It's like I want to be part, like magic needs innovation or science needs innovation.
Hmm.
And it's like I think that's also a fundamental thing that gets looked over a lot in, I guess, in like punk stories, but it's like you have to look at the people who first sort of like create these movements, and who are the first people who sort of, are the ones that start these movements and then spearhead them. A
That
lot
sh-
of them, a lot of them are the lower classes. They are, and we haven't talked about this in the show, but it is people of color. And
Mhm.
what happens once these innovations get made? What happens when the big
Right.
discoveries happen? The credit gets taken from them and placed upon the people who
Hmm.
fund them or gave them the push, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Let's not forget how that storyline ends in this episode, though, because even Heimerdinger's saying, like, this is not what the future of Piltover looks like, which is very, I think, I don't know if egotistical is the right word, but like, who gives him the right to make that call, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of say so because the council lady shows up at the end and she says, I think that's a matter of the council to decide.
Mm-hmm.
Which, okay, that's cool. There's a little light of hope because she undermines
Heimerdinger.
Heimerdinger, but at the same time, it's kind of terrifying because we met the council last episode
Mm-hmm.
and they don't seem like good people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes forward.
Even she doesn't. I don't.
She seems
I
more opportunistic. She's an
Yeah,
opportunist. I
she's an
don't know.
opportunist because her first scene, she's talking about kind of how bored she is.
Yeah, like we
You
haven't really
know?
got to look at where her values align. We just
Yeah.
know she's looking for a change. She's looking to create something new.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be interesting. And at the same time, you have Powder exploding stuff with that same stones, but apparently there's also the whole like alchemy stuff going on in the lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't know if that's all over now because that guy seems dead or what, and that whole warehouse is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that's very interesting how they're working on hex tech, and in the down in the lanes, like they don't have access to that stuff. So what are they doing? Oh, they're messing with chemicals, which is also interesting because that's the stuff that messed up Silco's eye. It's like
Mm-hmm.
almost like the grime and pollution, the sludge is like in the veins of the lanes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what are they actually? What is shimmer? Like, what is going into that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's this weird kind of like science versus magic punk stuff, arcana punk. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Did you see the poster? One of the posters for this show was that one of the final shots where it's just like Silco's arm and he's holding powder and her eyes just like blood red and crying.
I did not see that.
I'll send it to you. And the way her hair kind of falls, it says Jinx in her hair.
Huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like her hair strands. And everyone's like, ooh, Easter eggs. Because it also came out when like the Vi poster came out. It's like, oh, it's Vi. And is that little Jinx?
Mm.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Interesting.
we'll have to see, man. I think we're gonna next week we enter Act Two. It's good. Things are gonna get interesting to see where the show goes.
Mm-hmm.
So next time we're talking about season 1, episode 4, Happy Progress Day. As
Mm.
Piltover prospers and celebrates themselves, a familiar face returns to wreak havoc.
Mm.
And let's slip the hounds of war.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
Oh man. Well,
Interesting.
This was fun, man. This was a great episode.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. Listeners, hit us up. We want to know, what did you enjoy this episode? What are your thoughts and theories? No spoilers, because no one has contacted us through Twitter or our hashtag Lost Legacies, but there are a lot of new viewers or listeners to the podcast. And I think it's because we inadvertently, Sam, timed it just right with this podcast, because between episodes 1 and 2, or actually right, this is tricky because we record these in advance.
Oh yeah.
I think it right before or right after episode 1 premieres, they're doing
this is like the anniversary.
The 1 year anniversary of Arcane. It came out last November, and they've already confirmed season 2. They had a really good soundtrack album that came out, and now they're doing the remixes, and just like there's a lot of vibes on Arcane right now, and like totally caught that by accident or by destiny.
By fate.
Yeah, we got more people checking out the podcast now. So
hey,
welcome
guys, welcome everyone.
I hope we're at least somewhat fun to listen to, and if we are, catch us next time. Until then, hit us up, send us questions and stuff at hashtag Lost Legacies. You can find me on Twitter. Twitter's hanging on, man. Like it's a dumpster fire. I knew it was gonna be bad. I had no idea how quickly Twitter was gonna crumble.
Yeah,
like it is insane. But until they take it down, I'm on Twitter at _ Mad Jimenez. And you can continue to find me on Instagram at Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter because I'm going down with this ship, and on Instagram at Reel, that's REEL Texas Weirdo.
Until next time, get lost.
No.
You got a new one?
Yeah. Because I listened this time to what they say at the end of the opening credits.
We're going with that one. Okay,
we're going with that one. So until next time, listeners, look out for yourself.
Look out for yourself.